I always arrived before everyone else. The office lights were still dim when I unlocked my desk drawer each morning, the air quiet enough to hear the hum of the servers down the hall. I liked those first minutes of the day, when the work belonged to me alone, before emails, meetings, and expectations crowded in. For years, that was my routine. I didn't complain. I didn't compete for attention. I worked. If someone stayed late, I stayed later. If a deadline looked impossible, I found a way to make it reasonable. When mistakes happened, I fixed them quietly so no one else would have to answer for them. People called me reliable. That word followed me everywhere. My boss used it often. Good, you're here. I knew you'd handle it. Just give it to her, she won't mess it up. I thought that meant something. The day everything changed started like any other. I was halfway through my morning tasks when a message popped up on my screen. Conference room. Now. No explanation. No subject. I gathered my notebook, straightened my jacket, and walked in without worry. Meetings happened all the time. Sometimes they were urgent. Sometimes they were pointless. This one felt different the moment I stepped inside. Everyone was already there. My coworkers sat around the table, laptops open, coffee cups untouched. No one met my eyes. My boss stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The door closed behind me. He didn't ask me to sit. We'll keep this short, he said. I felt a tightening in my chest, subtle at first. You're being let go, he continued, his voice flat. Effective immediately. The room went silent. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. I'm sorry, I said. He glanced at a sheet of paper. This position is no longer a fit. We're moving in a different direction. I looked around the table. Faces stared at screens, at walls, anywhere but me. I don't understand, I said, my voice suddenly thin. Is there a problem with my work? He didn't answer the question. HR will email you the details, he said. Please return your badge and laptop before you leave. In front of everyone. No warning, no conversation, no chance to speak. My throat burned, but I forced myself to nod. Okay, I said quietly. I picked up my notebook, my hands shaking just enough that I noticed, and walked out. Behind me, the meeting resumed. I made it to the restroom before the tears came. I locked myself into a stall, pressed my palm to my mouth, and tried to breathe. My chest felt heavy, like something had collapsed inward. I replayed every late night, every skipped lunch, every time I'd said yes when I should have said no. It hadn't mattered. When I finally left the building, the sun was too bright. The city moved the same way it always did. Cars honking, people rushing, life continuing without pause. I clutched a small cardboard box to my chest. My mug, a pen, a photo I'd never bothered to frame. That was it. Years of work reduced to a box I could carry with one arm. The bus ride home blurred together. I stared out the window, watching streets pass by, my mind circling the same question again and again. What did I do wrong? By the time I reached my apartment, my eyes burned and my head ached. I dropped the box on the table and sank onto the couch, shoes still on. That's when my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but she knew. Somehow, she always did. Are you home? She asked softly. Yes, I said. There was a pause. Come over. I didn't argue. My parents' house smelled like tea and warm food when I walked in. My mother took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug without asking questions. I broke. I told them everything. How he'd said it, where I was standing, how everyone had watched and said nothing. I did everything right, I whispered. I gave them everything. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't rush to speak. He waited. Then he said quietly, and now? I don't know, I admitted. I feel empty. My mother held my hands. This isn't the end, she said. It just feels like it. My father nodded once. Sometimes, he said, being fired isn't rejection. I looked at him. Sometimes, he continued, it's release. I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling I thought I'd outgrown, I felt something shift beneath the sadness. Not hope, not anger, something quieter. A question. If all of that work hadn't protected me, what had it really built? The next morning felt unfamiliar. I woke up before my alarm out of habit, then remembered there was nowhere I needed to be. The realization hit softly but stayed, like a weight I couldn't shake off. I lay there listening to the house wake up, the kettle in the kitchen, my father's footsteps, the faint sound of the radio. For years, mornings had been measured by urgency. Now they were empty. At breakfast, no one rushed me. My mother placed a cup of tea in front of me and sat down. "You don't have to decide anything today," she said. "I know," I replied, though my chest tightened at the word decide. My father folded the newspaper. "Tell me something," he said. "When was the last time your boss asked what you wanted?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. I couldn't remember. He nodded, as if that answer had been enough. "That job took more from you than it gave back." I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend the years I'd invested. But the truth sat too close to the surface. Days passed slowly. Emails arrived from HR, formal, distant, full of phrases like transition period and final documentation. I read them once and archived them. There was nothing left to negotiate. Friends texted, surprised. Coworkers sent short messages, careful and awkward. Most of them said the same thing. I didn't see this coming. Neither had I. But something else began to happen too. I noticed how my body felt without the constant pressure. How I slept through the night. How my shoulders loosened without realizing they'd been tense for years. The crying stopped, not because I was fine, but because I was thinking. One afternoon, I opened my laptop for the first time since the meeting. Not to apply for jobs. To look at old files. I scrolled through documents I'd created, systems I'd designed, reports that carried my fingerprints even when my name wasn't on them. Entire workflows existed because I'd stayed late enough to build them. I saw patterns I hadn't noticed before. I hadn't just been working. I'd been running things. Quietly, my phone buzzed. A message from my former boss. "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long moment before replying. "About what?" The response came quickly. "There's been some confusion since you left." Confusion. I felt something shift again. Not anger, not satisfaction. Awareness. I agreed to meet him the next day. He chose a neutral place, a cafe near the office. He arrived late, looking tired in a way I'd never seen before. "You were holding a lot together," he said after a few minutes of small talk. I waited. "There have been issues," he continued. "Things aren't moving as smoothly." I nodded slowly. "That's unfortunate." He cleared his throat. "We may have underestimated your role." There it was. Not an apology. An admission. "I see," I said. He leaned forward. "Would you consider consulting? Temporarily. Just to stabilize things." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, "Under what terms?" He blinked, surprised by the question. "Because," I continued evenly, "I won't step back into the same arrangement." The silence stretched. "We can discuss compensation," he said carefully. "And authority," I added. "And boundaries." His expression tightened. "You're in no position to make demands." I met his eyes. "You're the one asking." The realization landed between us. He didn't answer. I stood up. "Let me know when you're ready to talk seriously." I walked out before he could respond. That evening, I told my parents what had happened. My mother smiled softly. My father nodded once. "You see it now," he said. "See what?" "Your value wasn't tied to that title," he replied. "They just benefited from you believing it was." I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Control. The call came 2 days later. Different tone. Different urgency. This time, he didn't waste words. "We're willing to meet your conditions." I closed my eyes for a moment before answering. "Good," I said, "because I've decided something too." When we met again, I didn't bring a notebook. I brought clarity. He started talking the moment I sat down, about timelines, deliverables, how quickly things needed to be fixed. The same urgency that had once lived on my shoulders was now clearly his. I let him finish. Then I spoke. "I'm not coming back as an employee," I said. "I'm not taking orders, and I'm not working quietly." He frowned. "Then what are you proposing?" "A contract," I replied. "Limited scope, clear authority, and compensation that reflects the damage you caused by letting me go publicly." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He asked for numbers. I gave him boundaries. No late nights. No unpaid fixes. No blurred roles. When I finished, he leaned back, exhaled, and said something that surprised me. "We should have done this years ago." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." He signed. The first day I returned, I didn't use the old entrance. Security escorted me through the main doors, not to a desk, but to a conference room with my name already on the screen. People looked up as I passed. Some smiled. Some looked confused. No one laughed. I didn't address the room. I didn't need to. I started with systems, then processes, then accountability. Within a week, things stabilized. Within a month, they improved. Not because I worked harder than before, but because I worked honestly, with authority that matched responsibility. And when my contract ended, I left again. On my terms. At home, life felt lighter. My parents noticed it first. "You don't carry the same weight," my mother said one evening. "I don't let it sit there anymore," I replied. My father nodded. "That's the difference." I didn't rush into another job. I didn't panic. I took my time. I chose. The next role I accepted wasn't louder or flashier. But it respected limits. It asked questions. It listened. And when I walked into that office on my first day, I knew something had changed permanently. Not the world. Me. Months later, I ran into a former coworker. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "You handled it well." I smiled. "I handled it differently." That night, lying in bed, I thought back to the moment I'd stood in that conference room, being told my job was over. I'd walked out humiliated, carrying a box, convinced I'd failed. I hadn't. I'd been interrupted. Sometimes what feels like an ending is just a door you didn't know you were allowed to open. My boss fired me in front of everyone. I went home crying. And what happened after changed everything.